Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, we ask that you kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices or place them on silent. Thank you.
Well, good morning, first of all, and thank you for being here today. Rabbi David Englander, Congregation Bethel, and that is the congregation with which Lea has been associated for so many decades in ways that will be reflected on over the course of our service this morning, together with our Chazan, Lisa Pomerantz-Borough, and our newest rabbi, Sam Hollander, and our beloved Rabbi Emeritus, Aaron Krupnick. We are all here to do what you are here to do as well, which is to begin to honor the life and continuing legacy of someone so precious and special to, it is no exaggeration, many thousands of family members, students, and colleagues alike. I want to welcome and thank especially our colleagues in the clergy and other community leadership who are here today, and I want to pay a particular word of recognition and comfort to Lea's KBA family. It goes beyond colleagues, goes beyond fellow teachers, goes to the closest of respectful and loving relationships, and I know that you are among the mourners today. Before we get to the speakers who will be sharing their reflections and memories of this extraordinary and memorable person, we will turn to the liturgy of the Jewish funeral service. It will not surprise you in the least that everything that will be sung here at our service by our Chazan was specifically requested by Lea. And we know that her wishes will be honored and respected in all the ways today and in the time to come that will truly be a continuation of the impactful, positively influential life that she lived. And so we begin with singing and then the translation of Psalm 23. We call on our Chazan.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binot asher yarbitzeni, al mei meluchot yenaleni. Nafshi eshovev, nafshi eshovev, yanacheni v'magle tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begetz al mavet, lo yirara ki ata imadi. mishantecha. Shivtecha umishantecha. Hema yenachamuni. Taroch tavanai. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan. Neged sorerai. Yarerai, rai, rai, rai. Yarerai, rai, rai, rai. Yarerai, rai, 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 rai. Yarerai, rai, rai. Yarerai, rai, rai. Yarerai, rai, rai, rai.
The 23rd Psalm, a psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. To begin the sharing of memories and stories, we call upon Lea's granddaughter, Ray, to share.
My Savta and I have always had a very special relationship. She was always the first person I wanted to call to share good news, but she was especially the person that I leaned on during hard times in life. Even from an early stage, Savta was the person I went to. For example, when I thought my world was ending, when my parents said I couldn't get my first cell phone, at an absurdly young age, mind you, I of course went to Savta. She was happy to strike an agreement and buy me my first phone, with, of course, just one caveat, being that I would call her every day. I was more than happy to oblige, and we agreed that it would be our little secret. Naturally, I made it about 20 minutes home with my parents before they noticed I was hiding something, but I knew I had nothing to worry about because Savta would take care of it like she always did. And as I grew up and the challenges I faced in life evolved a bit, Savta remained the strong force in all of our lives we could always rely on. As you all know, Savta loved to teach. There were many valuable lessons she taught my siblings and I, but I think the most important was about strength and resilience. She taught us to always push forward, no matter what life threw at you. She reminded me often to not think so much and to just put one foot in front of the other and assured me the rest would work itself out. And of course, she was always right. She was a force of nature and led by example, quite literally working her entire life. Probably the only teacher that can say she taught in the same school as not one but two of her great-grandchildren. And I'm sure she's the only person that turned 90 and was still contributing to their 401k. She was truly one of a kind. And while Savta had a tough exterior, those who knew her know she was really mostly all bark with just a touch of bite. Those who knew her know how deeply and wholeheartedly she loved her family and friends. And while my siblings and I will miss you every day, I know the love you've given us will last us all a lifetime.
Thank you, Ray. That was beautiful. Good people, it is my honor to pay tribute to my good friend of nearly 30 years, Lea Rozovsky. In a way, it seems rather odd to be together to remember her, because Lea was always so vibrant and alive. Her keen mind never faltered even into her final days, and she walked quicker than just about anybody I know, regardless of age. And yet, here we are. Lea knew that this day was coming. She knew that it was fast approaching, and so a month ago we got together for an afternoon of conversation in her lovely home, as I have done many times. But this one, unfortunately, would be the last. Today I simply want to share some of what we spoke about that day, indicative of our friendship and so telling of the person we all love dearly. Our conversation started, as pretty much every one of them has over the years, with some talk about Tanakh. In this case, it was the foibles of David HaMelech. From there, we turned to philosophy. Lea posed a question to me, something that she said she had been struggling with lately. She asked me, what do you think is the most important, Chachma, Bina, or Da'at? And so we dug deeper into this topic of learning and education, which of course are the cornerstone of her life. Chachma is practical knowledge, how to do things, how to drive a car, how to tie your shoes, how to learn to speak Hebrew. Things that you can learn and teach, that's Chachma. Bina is knowledge of relationships, how to put people, ideas, and things together. It's logical reasoning, how things fit into your world. Da'at serves to bridge intelligence and emotions, which then become the motivation on how we act, based both on how we understand and how we feel. Lea said that she believed that Bina was the most important trait. She was drawn to Bina at this stage of her life. She could see, because she could see in retrospect, kind of out of the rear view mirror, how all the experiences and all the relationships over the years made her into the person who was now preparing to leave this world behind. At that point, I could sense that she was ready to reminisce. So I asked Lea about her early years and her most distant memories. And Yossi and Fanny, my heart goes out to the two of you, and you're here to fact check me, in part because the entire conversation that we had was in Hebrew. She recalled how her mother, or your mother, Chana, was born in Vilna. Your father, Ephraim, was from Ravna. They met in Israel. Their entire families had been wiped out in the Shoah, except for Chana's mother, who came with her daughter to Israel when Leah's mom, your mom, was only 20 years old. Leah recalled that your grandmother never spoke Hebrew, only Yiddish, because it was Lashon HaKodesh. Her parents were highly educated and learned. Your mom was like Golda, your sister was fond of saying, and your dad was an Ilui, a Talmudic genius. After they married, Leah's parents moved to Chana's kibbutz, Ramat HaKovesh. But because the kibbutz was, and here your sister switched to English to make sure that I got the word correct. Because the kibbutz was not egalitarian, so her mom insisted that both of your parents moved 7 kilometers down the road to Kfar Saba. It was the first time either of them had lived in a big city, which is what they called it at the time. Both of your parents were involved in the Haganah, and Leah remembers your home full of weapons. She recalls that your father kept a handgun under the table, and she remembers rifles in the closets. In fact, she said that when your parents sold the house, they had to warn new buyers to look for weapons they might have forgotten where they put them. She told me that her parents personally knew Ben-Gurion, Moshe Dayan, and other Zionist leaders. In fact, Yitzhak Rabin taught your dad how to use weapons, and he worked in the Shin Bet. I guess it's okay to say that now. Your dad, her father, she told me, was the first to uncover Yisrael Ber, who was a hero in the War of Independence for Israel, but ultimately became a Russian spy spying on the Jewish state. Leah smiled broadly as she remembered the spy visiting your home. She remembers her parents saying one to another every time he left, "He asks too many questions." So her dad went to Ben-Gurion and told him that he suspected that Yisrael Ber was a spy, but BG did not believe him since Ber and Ben-Gurion were such good friends. Eventually, further evidence mounted. Yisrael Ber was arrested, tried, and convicted, and it made Leah so proud to retell that story of your father's valor. Incidentally, her mother never left Israel. She reasoned, why go anywhere else once you made it to Israel? But your dad came to visit Leah and her family in every place they lived, including here in America. Looking back wistfully at her early years, Leah spoke to me about when she entered the Israeli army as an educator. She was assigned to work in Kiryat Yarim with troubled kids who she said were unbelievably difficult. And from there, her start in education got even rougher when she was sent to work with psychotically disturbed boys in Ramatayim. After that, with just too many harrowing stories, Leah decided as a 19-year-old that she had had enough. She and Eliezer were married in Vad Lama'an HaChayal in Tel Aviv in 1955. There was a big party, and a new life journey began. As you will speak of in just a moment, both of her sons, you know that your mother thought it a privilege to be married to your dad. She venerated him. He was a man of great integrity, tremendous intellect, honesty, sincerity, and depth. They made a great team, always learning together and growing together and sharing what they learned with so many others. Eliezer came to this country to study nuclear energy at Berkeley, eventually coming to work in the east at the Salem nuclear power plant. Leah told me that they lived in Allentown, and she taught in the Jewish school there, but ultimately the commute was too hard on your dad, and so you moved here to Cherry Hill. It was at that time, some 40 years ago, that Lea Rozovsky met Rabbi Isaac Furman. She came to his office, she said, with letters of recommendation. Rabbi Furman glanced at them for a moment, and then they began to talk. After a short while, he took the letters of recommendation and threw them in the trash and said, "I can write too, you're hired." From that moment on, Leah and Rabbi Furman formed a deep and meaningful friendship based on mutual respect. And together, as Rabbi Englander said, they influenced more lives than any of us will ever know. She was the consummate Jewish educator, and others I know will speak of that, so I'll defer to them. But on a personal level, Leah talked about how much she liked teaching for Rabbi Furman, both at the Kelman Academy and alongside Molly Furman at the Bethel Religious School. I commented to Leah last month when we spoke that I would often wonder how she got the energy to teach at both schools. And I asked her, didn't you ever get tired of teaching? And here's what she said, and I'm quoting now. "I am grateful for all my opportunities and all the connections I have made with all of my students over the years. I never got tired because I am most alive in the classroom. My life has been full, and it has been beautiful, and I have no regrets. We spoke for a couple more minutes, but she seemed to be getting tired, so I told her I thought I would go. She walked me to the door. I turned to look at her. She looked me directly in the eyes and said, Ani lo mefachedet. I am not afraid. So let me close with the words of Abraham Joshua Heschel, who captured the essence, the power of, and the impact of teachers, especially those lucky enough to teach children. He said, what we need more than anything else isn't textbooks, but rather text people. It is the personality of the teacher, which is the text that students read, the text that they will never forget. So as we hear the coming words of tribute from family and friends, let us do what Lea always did and return to the text. Let us bring into closer focus the many life lessons we learn from Mora Lea and be inspired by them, and in turn, pay tribute to her memory through a life of good deeds. Tehei nishmatat tzura b'tzura chaim, may her soul be bound in the bond of eternal life. Amen. It's now my honor to call on Rachel Zivik, the head of school of Kelman Brown Academy.
I am truly honored and humbled to be representing so many of Lea's KBA colleagues and students who are here this morning, including the KBA 8th grade and on the live stream. In the over 40 years Lea taught at Kelman Brown Academy, she touched the lives of hundreds of students and their families. She did this by going above and beyond for them, in and out of the classroom. Each of her students had a deeply personal connection with Mora Lea because all of the different ways she showed them how much she cared. She did the same for all of us, her colleagues, administrators, teachers, and especially the Judaic Studies faculty who she mentored. She was part of the backbone of our KBA family. We celebrated Lea's 90th birthday together at KBA last year, a remarkable accomplishment. To us, Lea was an inspiration, a force of nature, actually. There was truly nothing that could hold her back from coming each morning to teach, especially now that she had 2 great-grandchildren at the school. Even when she was in pain, even at the end of her life, KBA was always at the forefront of her mind. At KBA, Lea taught Hebrew and Judaic studies, and I am sure that at some point, Lea taught about the Hebrew month of Elul. Lea passed away on Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first day of Elul. Our tradition teaches that the letters that spell Elul, Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed, are actually an acronym for a verse from the Song of Songs, Ani lidodi vidodi li. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. It's hard to put into words just how much KBA meant to Lea and how much she meant to KBA. She truly loved the school, and she was loved by her KBA family. She shared with me, even in the last few weeks, how next to her family, teaching at KBA was what she had enjoyed most in her life. Last year, when Lea was inducted into the Rabbi Furman Legacy Society for her years of dedication and service to KBA, she shared about her first meeting with Rabbi Furman, Zichrono Livracha, a slightly different version than what Rabbi Krupnik shared. Though she brought him an impressive resume as well as letters of recommendation, he let her know she'd be doing a demo lesson tomorrow with the 5th grade on the book of Joshua. At the end of the lesson, he didn't give any feedback. He just told her she was hired. That began a decades-long friendship between the two of them. And as Lea continued to innovate with special programs she brought to KBA, sometimes Rabbi Furman pushed back. But I think we all know that when Lea put her mind to something, there was really no stopping her. Many of these programs, including the 5th grade wedding, of which Lea was especially proud, are still a part of our curriculum today. Rabbi Furman once told me that he thought Lea would retire at some point too. Lea never had any plans for retirement. Her plan was always to continue teaching what she loved. When Rabbi Moshe Schwartz became the head of school at KBA, he too had a deep friendship with Mora Lea. They would each arrive at school early in the morning and talk together at the front desk about a wide range of topics. When Rabbi Moshe came up from Baltimore to visit Lea last Sunday, he shared that when he arrived, she opened her eyes and told him in Hebrew that she was glad he came and asked all about her family. They were both proud of the special bond they had with each other. And I know that former head of school Emily Cook and Geveret Selma Rothman felt the very same way about the bond they had with Rabbi Furman. With Mora Lea. I was fortunate to share a special bond with Lea as we worked together for the last 18 years at KBA. I learned so many lessons from her. Some she shared in words, many she shared by example. I will share just a few. Lea loved to teach her students Tanakh, and though she shared in her own words that she wanted her students to become wonderful scholars, she said that at KBA, we teach them to be good people. That, she said, is number one. And then she would go on to quote Rabbi Furman, who said, the best book to teach them how to be good was, in fact, the Bible. Lea showed her love in thoughtful gifts. How many of you have something that Lea gave you? We have a few things at our house that she gave to me or my children when they were her students, like this. When my daughter Yael and I went to see Lea just last week, she made sure that we didn't leave empty-handed. So she gave Yael this chamsa, which I know she will always treasure. Lea loved sharing the beautiful things she had with others. That gave her great joy, and it made us feel loved. Lea believed in what one of her mentors, Rabbi Brockman, said, love and understanding of Judaism comes from the refrigerator. Many of us know that Lea was the consummate host, and when she hosted, she cooked many different dishes, each one presented beautifully on an elegant serving piece with beautiful flowers on her table. She made it all look effortless. Her students, too, benefited from this core belief in the importance of food. Even last week, as her health declined rapidly, she arranged for cupcakes to be delivered to KBA for the 8th grade class on their very first day of school. Think about that for a minute. While Lea was on hospice, she wanted to make sure that the graduating class of KBA had a treat for their final first day of school. That's just who Lea was. Thoughtful, loving, and nurturing until the very end. Ani ledodi v'dodi li. KBA was her beloved, and she was most certainly beloved by KBA. Mora Lea, you taught us all so much for so many years, and now we will carry your lessons forward, ever mindful of the extraordinary impact you have had on our community. We will honor your memory each and every day at KBA by continuing to do what you love the most, to teach. Yehi Zichra Baruch. May her memory be for a blessing.
Thank you, Rachel. As Rabbi Englander mentioned earlier, Moralea asked specifically for Eshet Chayil to be sung, and she was an Eshet Chayil. Both of my children had the gift of being her student as well, among hundreds of other students. But perhaps what impressed me the most is the way she made me feel as their mom when she would compliment my children, and that she remembered every child by name for 40 years worth of children. I can't remember a bar mitzvah from 3 weeks ago. She remembered every single student in Eshet Chayil, Zichronah Livracha. Eshet Chayil ממצא ורחוק מפנינים מכרה בטח בלב בלה ושאלה לא יחסר גמלת טוב ולא רע כל ימי חייה. יאי די 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 יאי די 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 יאי די די Ya ba da 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 da. Itai.
I'm Lea Rozovsky. I'm Leah's son. I was personally warmed my heart to see so many people come to see her. I knew her as a son. She was my mother, but I wasn't that aware of her work connections and the students and so on. So it's wonderful to see that so many people agree about the way she was. My mother was a wonderful mother. She was an excellent and loyal friend to many people. She will be missed by many. She was a wonderful teacher for 70 years, and that is many years. She sometimes taught students and their children and sometimes their grandchildren. Her students remembered her well and often expressed their gratitude in thankful messages. We have many thank you notes and letters from students at home, but seeing actual people makes it real for me. She also had many plaques and awards for teaching over the years. My mother's parents came from Eastern Europe, from Odessa. They had yeshivot there, and her father studied in a yeshiva, and he was qualified to be a rabbi. Her parents moved, Ephraim and Chana, her parents. By the way, this is her brother, came from Europe. Yossi, most of you know him. They came to live in Kfar Saba with, Ray was close to grandma, and Leah also had a grandma she was close to, and that was Sabta Rivka. She was close to Sabta Rivka. So there's a connection between young women and their grandmother, I think. Kfar Saba in Hebrew means grandfather's village. And I'll tell you a secret, when they took me to visit Grandpa, and they said, we're visiting Saba in Kfar Saba, I thought it was his village. The whole village, I thought that was his. Kfar Saba. So, one thing that people aren't aware here is how tough life was in Israel in those days. There were dangers from Arab attacks just like today, but in those days, the British government didn't allow Jews to have guns. So, as they told you, they had a slick in their house. Slick is a term in Hebrew for collection of guns. Certain Jewish individuals were trusted to have guns in their homes, and they had to be very responsible. And Ephraim and Hannah had guns in their homes because they were dependable. In those days, the Jews who were caught by the government could be hanged. They hanged them. At that time, there was, even though life was hard, there was the immense joy of knowing that this was the first independent Jewish state in 2,000 years. And you can even see it on celebrations when the UN voted on YouTube. In Israel, water was scarce, so, and when I grew up, and I think everybody, they had advertisements on the walls, Chaval al kol tipa, save every drop. So it was hot, it was dusty, and the roads were not paved. Many roads were just sand or dirt roads, especially in Kfar Saba. Just to illustrate how dangerous life was there, besides having barbed wire on both sides of the road and everywhere else, my grandmother, Sabta Rivka, who was very close to my mother, was in charge of the potatoes for dinner, usually. She was in charge to peel the potatoes. One day she walked the 25 meters to the burlap sack in the wooden dilapidated shack in the yard to pick up the potatoes for dinner. She put her hand in the sack, and she didn't know that inside the sack was a coiled venomous snake, the most venomous snake in Israel, called a viper. And it bit her. She realized she had only a few moments to get medical help, and fortunately she was a strong woman and she made it to the hospital. It's just an illustration of the everyday life in Israel. Yossi can vouch for that story. My mother's father, Ephraim, was not only studied to be a rabbi, but he became a worker of the land. He worked the land, and he became physically strong, or he was physically strong before that, but he worked the land, and people sought his advice. He was an ombudsman, which is, he brought people together. He found an understanding between the labor groups, unions in Israel, and the government. That's the Histadrut, the giant labor organization in Israel, Histadrut. One time my father told me the story that he came to visit Ephraim for some purpose or reason, and sitting in the dining room was the chief of staff of the entire Israeli army conferring with my father. Chaim Laskov, it was sitting there, and my father was floored. My father was a veteran himself. So Ephraim was in charge of both the ports, the harbor workers, and the El Al, the airlines. Let's see. Together they came to America and built a successful family life, and sent my brother and I to medical school. I studied pathology. My brother studied internal medicine. And I would say my mother was a loyal, brave, sometimes humorous, compassionate Jewish woman who influenced thousands of students about not only Jewish teachings but life itself. Yehi Zichra Baruch.
Honor now to call on Asif as our next speaker.
My mother passed away on the first day of school, something that Randy, my wife, predicted weeks ago when her health was declining. My mom was a teacher, which has been said many times today, for 70 years. Not many people can say that they taught their daughter-in-law in 4th grade, and 50 years later was still teaching in the same building as their great-grandchildren at age 90. Her drive and determination to get back to work was remarkable. After suffering 2 codes in the ER, including 2 hospital stage major surgery and rehab, my mother returned to work 8 weeks later in her 80s 2 separate times. Although she was a petite woman of barely over 5 feet tall, when she entered the room on her own, with a cane or a walker, she was a giant. My mom was a character, but a character that was loved. Although she was elderly, she had youthful, current opinions on politics, Israel, and family matters. However, if she thought you were wrong, she let you know. She could quote the Bible to you and make it viable to your daily life. My mom was a sapta to Joe, Allie, Ray, Ross, and Sam, as well as their teacher. To her many students, she was their teacher as well as their sapta. So many students have told me that my mom was like a grandmother to them in many ways. My mother moved to this country with my family in 1967, not knowing anyone, and she left this world knowing pretty much everyone. In the later years of her life, she gave up driving. When I drove her to the bank, florist, Trader Joe's, everywhere, everyone loved her, and everyone wanted to talk to her. All her doctors involved in her care, my mom taught their children, and she would get a report on their latest achievements during her office visits. Although today is a sad day, I also look at it as a time to celebrate a life well lived. My mother felt that teaching was a noble profession that allowed her to profoundly change people's lives. She would have loved to see everyone here today, and she will be missed greatly. As I look at my grandchildren, I see that Henry inherited my mother's love of learning and her intensity. Goldie inherited her spunk and zest for life, and Penelope inherited her concentration and affinity for problem solving. In this way, her legacy lives on.
Thank you, Asif. Anytime. We are honored that Lea's close friend and cherished colleague, Hedda Morton, has made the trip here, and we'll share some thoughts and reflections.
My name is Hedda Morton, and I want to thank the family for extending me the honor of speaking today as Lea's friend. I just want to add this comment, is that a number of years ago, when Lea was making preparations for this day, she said to me, very quietly but very directly, "I want you to speak at my funeral." Having with that in mind, I was still really deeply honored when I was requested to speak and share a few words. Lea and I enjoyed a wonderfully close and deeply personal friendship, one which Lea characterized as being more like sisters than like friends, for almost 38 years. Lea and I met shortly after we moved to Cherry Hill in the fall of 1986. We both taught in Bethel's afternoon religious school, evening Hebrew high school, and the following year, when I joined Kelman Academy's middle school, our classrooms were across the hall from each other. Our friendship developed slowly, gradually, gently. We always felt comfortable and at home with each other. It was as if we had known each other all our lives. We built a friendship that lasted My friend Lea was filled with love for her family, love for her many friends, and especially love for her students. My friend Lea was an amazing teacher because she loved to learn and to share what she learned with others. Lea was a blessing to thousands of children, first in Israel, where she worked with troubled children, then as an exchange teacher in a day school in New York, and subsequently, after moving to the U.S., in day schools and in synagogue schools in every community where she lived, touching each student as if he or she was her own child. She nurtured and guided them to experience the treasures of the Jewish past and inspired them with stories of the birth of the modern state of Israel as she had experienced it. Along the way, they developed strong Jewish identities that would carry them into the future. My friend Lea looked forward to the local theater season, shows in New York City, and of course, the latest performances each time she visited Israel. She loved going to the opera, particularly when she visited Yossi and Fanny in Vienna, and frequently played music at home. Following the passing of her beloved husband Eliezer Zichrono Livracha, Lea sponsored regular musical programs at Kelman Brown Academy in his memory. Lea loved to read. She knew the latest books, and friends regularly brought her the latest Hebrew novels from Israel. She participated in an Israel book group. My friend Lea was a spectacular hostess and an awesome cook. I asked Lea if she would show me how she made her gefilte fish. Of course, she said. You can come here next time I make it. I remember carefully writing all the ingredients and then recording each step of the process. Although I never made it myself, it was too much of a balagan for me, I still have the recipe and think of her each time I look at it. It was from Lea that I learned the artistry of setting a beautiful table, a talent that I tried to emulate in my own home. Everyone knows how much Lea loved flowers. One day, she invited me to go to the annual Philadelphia Flower Show. I had never been, so of course I agreed. It was the start of an annual tradition that continued for more than 30 years until COVID intervened. At the same time, Lea introduced me to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. The brochure of special exhibits would arrive, and we set a date to see the exhibit. Coffee and cake in the cafe, and a visit to the gift shop always completed the outing. I so enjoyed these museum experiences that one of the first things I did after we moved to Ohio 3 years ago was I joined the Cleveland Museum of Art, remembering and missing Lea, but hoping I would find a new friend to go with me. My friend Lea and I built a deep and lasting friendship. She was kind and generous, thoughtful and reflective, articulate and passionate, bright, curious, and inquisitive. She possessed a ruach, an energy, and a zest for life, unlike anyone else. I can recount numerous stories, experience, dinners, and cups of coffee, where everything from work and family to the arts, music, theater, and politics were topics of conversation and speculation. And always there was joy, laughter, affection, and understanding. One last story. One afternoon, Leah and I were visiting, and I commented on her many collections. She began to tell me the story behind several items: an angel figurine, a decorative plate, a small ceramic box. She noted that each item told a story about a person, a place, or an event. Together, they represented a lifetime of memories. Wistfully, she noted that the memories are what's important. Walking through my home during these past several weeks, Leah's words echo in my mind. There's a favorite glass pitcher on my counter, a gift from Leah. There's a set of European cake forks and coffee spoons she helped me select on our trip to Vienna. And the Hamsa necklace I am wearing today was a gift for a very special occasion. I wish everyone could have a friend like Leah. I will miss my friend Leah, but memories of her will always be with me. Zichrona livracha. May the memory of Leah Bat Ephraim V'Chana always be a blessing to her family, friends, and everyone who knew her.
Thank you so much, Hedda, and thank you to all of our speakers today. In a reference that might be unexpected, not only by you, but I'm guessing might have been unexpected by Leah as well, when President Lincoln died, it is reported that one of the first things that was said came from his friend and the country's Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, who is reported to have declared, "Now he belongs to the ages." For all the ways that our honored teacher, your loving mother, grandmother, and sister shared her life, her wisdom, and her endless dedication to both Yiddishkeit and Yahadut, the living and learning of Jewish tradition, a share of her soul now belongs not only to the ages, but to everyone she touched. Through a 90-year journey on this earth, the vast majority of them spent toiling in God's most important vineyard, which is the classroom. Since I heard of Leah's passing from this world, like you, I've been thinking about the extraordinary impact that she had on so many people. My old friend, former camper and staff member at Camp Ramah, Rabbi Schwartz, wrote in tribute that Leah taught not one, not two, but in some families 3 generations of students. And I would suggest that this is only something that captures a fraction of the reverberation of her influence, because every one of her students took with them and shared consciously or subconsciously the lessons that she taught them. Those surely include the specific knowledge she imparted in Hebrew and Bible, literature, and Jewish studies, but also, and maybe more importantly, she taught everyone a way of seeing the world, a way of thinking, of the value of education itself, of the safety, consideration, care, concern, and love that was demonstrated continually for decades by a master educator and a beautiful soul. Parshat Shoftim, this week's Torah portion, contains a verse that most of us would pass by quickly because it has so little to do with our contemporary lives. You may recall the concept of the city of refuge, the Ir Miklat. In the case of one who commits unintentional manslaughter, that person could flee to one of these cities and escape the fate that the family of the victim might have had in mind for them. There, in that city, they were untouchable. And there they stayed until the high priest of the day himself passed away, at which point their sentence would be concluded and they could return home. Told you, it's not so relevant, right? And what in the world does it have to do with teachers? Well, the verse says about the perpetrator, and he shall flee to one of these cities and live. The rabbis of the Talmud gave this phrase, and live, a fascinating interpretation that speaks to the endless dedication of teachers and the need for their presence in our lives and in our world. They taught that if a student was exiled, his teacher went into exile with him. One cannot live, certainly one cannot live to their potential or with fulfillment without many different things. Nourishment, not only of the body, but also of the soul and of the intellect. If the Torah says that one should go live in the Ir Miklat, to fully live, they would need a teacher. Every day, Lea gave hours, every year, to a new class or classes with the dedication, thoughtfulness, planning, and focus represented by this ancient teacher who would follow their student even into exile so that they would not starve. That is a legacy worth sharing, worth commemorating, and worth emulating, though we will all necessarily fall short in doing so. As interested as I was to learn more about Leah's early life as told by Rabbi Krupnik and these wonderful sons, I was very interested to learn that as closely as Leah's non-KBA teaching efforts here in our community were connected to our Bethel, that we were not her first Bethel. That fortunate congregation was Bethel of Allentown, the shul that you most closely associate with your childhood. As you often returned, I love this story, you often returned from school to an empty house because your dad was working and your mother went right from the Jewish day school to her responsibilities in the Hebrew school. Now, Allentown may not be the Jewish community it once was, but those dedicated to keeping it going surely remember Leah and Eliezer of blessed memory for their time and dedication there. South Jersey was chosen as your new home not only for its proximity to Eliezer's work, but for its strong Jewish community, made elite in a way by the presence and healthy functioning of our wonderful area Jewish day schools, including the place she would truly make home, the Kelman Brown Academy and Congregation Bethel. I know that as a KBA community, you mourn and will mark this year of mourning almost as these children do for a parent, reflecting in sadness but with even gratitude on all the ways that Mrs. Rozovsky, Mora Lea, impacted your community so positively. When I got to Bethel just over 2 years ago, where Leah taught in our religious school for some 36 years, all the while teaching at KBA, I had a conversation with her. Or more accurately, she had a conversation with me. No standing on ceremony, no platitudes, not that any of that was needed. Instead, what was communicated was not so much an invitation as a directive. I believe in Hebrew grammar she used what would be called the imperative form of these verbs. Something like, you will come teach my class. And she gave me a topic, and we set a date. And I did it then, and I did it again last year. Different topic. though I prepared each as carefully as I would have a master's thesis, because, and this is the honest truth, I did not want to disappoint her. I've been at this work a little while now, but let me tell you, I was on my toes every moment that I had the privilege of teaching in her presence, in her makom, her sacred space, her KBA classroom. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, a hero and teacher to many, shared a beautiful reflection on learning of the passing of his own teacher, without whom his path toward Torah greatness would not have been possible. He happened to get that difficult call the week of Parshat Shoftim. And I don't mind saying at all that he was the one who shared that rabbinic interpretation about the teacher going into the city of refuge with his student. And in that characteristically beautiful essay, he continues, I believe that Judaism made an extraordinarily wise decision when it made teachers its heroes and lifelong education its passion. We don't worship power or wealth. These things have their place, but they are not at the top of the hierarchy of values. Teachers develop us. They open us to the wisdom of the ages, helping us to see the world more clearly, think more deeply, argue more cogently, and decide more wisely. As a teacher, as our teacher, Lea did all of that, and she did it like no other. So to Asif and to Randy, to Itai, to Yossi and Fanny, I know that as much as your mother and your sister indeed belongs to the ages, and to all of us, her students, she belongs to you in a different and profound way. Your lives were blessed by her, and hers was blessed by you, including your true care and concern showed to her through these last harder years and even harder months. You are the first circle of closeness that defines you as mourners today, as Shiva unfolds and beyond. We stand with you and pray that you will find nechama, comfort, and consolation following loss. As we also stand with and offer condolences of our community to the beloved grandchildren, as Rabbi Krupnik might like to say, grandchildren in love, Joe and Samantha, Allison and Ross, Ray, and the great-grandchildren Penelope, Henry, and Goldie, who will continue to hear stories and lessons of Leah's truly accomplished life. There's a tradition that students may even tear kriya and say Kaddish for their own greatest teachers, such as the parental role that these sources of inspiration and knowledge provide for us. In other words, we mourn with all of you. To all of Leah's colleagues, and especially to all of her students, both here and no doubt now scattered around the continent, throughout Israel and the Jewish world, may you carry with you and exhibit the results of her presence in your lives. Think of it as your last assignment, and one whose positive results will be a more carefully considered existence, greater sincerity of interaction and conversation, stronger striving toward our individual and collective capacities, deeper dedication to the security of Israel, and an upgraded love for and appreciation of the teachers who have blessed us all, as Lea did for so long in so many profoundly important ways. Indeed, Tehei Nishmatat Tzura B'Tzura Chaim. May the soul of Lea Bat Ephraim V'Chana be for a lasting blessing. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. I'd like at this time to remind everyone that Shiva will commence at the Rozovsky home at 965 Chanticleer, following interment at Locust Wood. And because it is Friday, Erev Shabbat, visitation will conclude at 5 o'clock p.m. today. Tomorrow, visits are welcome from 5 o'clock p.m. onward, with a service that will take place following Shabbat at 8:15 p.m. Sunday visitation welcome from 3 o'clock p.m. onward, with a service to take place at 6 o'clock. This time, I invite you to rise in body or in spirit for the Amalei Rachamim Memorial Prayer.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochein b'mromim, Hametzei menucha nechona tachai kanefei hashechina, B'malot kedoshim utehorim, Kezohar harakiam hazahirim, Et nishmat Lea bat Ephraim v'Chana, Shehalcha le'olama, Began Eden tehei menuchata, Ana bal harachamim, Hastira beseter knafecha le'olamim, Utzror b'tzrachayim et nishmata, Adonai unachalata. V'tanuach b'shalom hamishkava, v'nomar Amen.
El Malei Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the soul of Leah bat Ephraim v'Chana, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bound of life. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated for the moment.